The unexpected arrival. Julian Mercer stared at the sleek white box on his doorstep, confusion etching lines across his forehead. The delivery notification on his phone claimed his new smart speaker had arrived, but this package was easily 4 times that size. No shipping label, no courier branding, just a seamless white container with a subtle blue glow emanating from the seams. "What the hell?" Julian muttered, nudging it with his foot. The box responded with a gentle vibration that sent him stumbling backward. Packages weren't supposed to vibrate, and they definitely weren't supposed to emit a soft, rhythmic pulse that reminded him of a heartbeat. Julian was a software engineer who thrived on logic. His apartment was a testament to his orderly mind, minimal furniture, everything in its place, his life running on schedules and routines. This anomaly on his doorstep represented everything he avoided: uncertainty, irregularity, the unexplained. He should call someone, the police maybe, or the building manager. Instead, Julian found himself dragging the box inside his apartment, curiosity overriding caution. It was surprisingly light for its size, almost as if it contained nothing but air. "This is stupid," he told himself even as he searched for something to pry open the seamless container. "Definitely stupid." When Julian finally managed to slide a letter opener along one of the glowing seams, the box responded with a soft hiss. The top panel slid open of its own accord, releasing a cloud of iridescent mist that smelled faintly of cinnamon and ozone. Julian backed away, heart pounding. "Hello? Is someone playing a joke?" The mist coalesced, forming a swirling column in the center of his living room. Julian's logical mind scrambled for explanations. Hologram? Some new technology demonstration? A prank from his colleagues at Horizon Tech? Then the mist took shape, forming a figure that appeared almost human, but not quite. Slender limbs, delicate features, skin that shimmered with an internal luminescence. The being was feminine in form, with eyes the color of twilight, and hair that seemed to flow like liquid silver. "Julian Mercer," the being spoke, her voice a melodic cascade of sound that seemed to originate from everywhere at once. "I am Nori. I need your help." Julian felt his reality tilt sideways. "What are you?" "I am a keeper from the veiled dimension," she replied, as if that explained everything. "I was sent to find you specifically." "Me? Why me?" Julian's voice cracked. His orderly world was crumbling around him. Nori moved toward him, her movements fluid and graceful. "Because you possess something rare in this dimension, the ability to perceive quantum resonance patterns. You can see what others cannot." Julian shook his head. "I'm just a software engineer. I code apps for smart homes." "Your dreams," Nori said softly. "The patterns you see when you close your eyes. The algorithms you create that shouldn't work but do. You've been sensing our dimension for years." Julian felt a chill. The strange mathematical inspirations that came to him in dreams. The coding solutions that seemed to materialize from nowhere. He'd always attributed them to his subconscious mind making connections. "How did you find me?" he asked. "Your last program," Nori explained. "The one you call Harmony. It created a bridge between our dimensions, however faint. I followed that signal to you." Julian stared at her, trying to process everything. "What do you need my help with?" Nori's expression grew serious. "My dimension is collapsing, and soon yours will begin to feel the effects too. Together, we may be able to stabilize the boundary between our worlds." As if to emphasize her words, the lights in Julian's apartment flickered. Outside his window, a flock of birds, suddenly, changed direction in perfect unison, forming an impossible geometric pattern against the sky. "The signs are already appearing," Nori whispered. "We don't have much time." Julian looked from the strange being to the white box she had arrived in, which was now closing itself. the blue glow fading. His orderly life had just been turned upside down, and some part of him knew it would never be the same again. "What happens next?" he asked, his voice steadier than he expected. Nori's luminescent lips curved into a smile. "That, Julian Mercer, depends entirely on you." The awakening. The morning sunlight streamed through Julian's apartment windows, casting long shadows across his living room. For a moment, he wondered if the previous night had been a strange dream, until he saw Nori sitting cross-legged on his coffee table, her skin shimmering with that otherworldly glow. "You're still here," Julian said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Nori tilted her head. "Did you expect me to disappear?" "Honestly, yes." Julian moved to the kitchen, desperately needing coffee. "People from other dimensions don't typically show up in boxes on my doorstep?" "I am not people," Nori replied, floating, not walking, to follow him. "And your dimension has rules that don't apply to me." Julian watched as she examined his coffee maker with intense curiosity. Every movement she made seemed to leave a trail of faint luminescence in the air, like watercolor bleeding across paper. "You mentioned last night that my dimension is in danger," Julian said, measuring coffee grounds. "I need details. What exactly is happening?" Nori placed her palm against the kitchen wall, and Julian gasped as the paint beneath her hand became transparent, revealing pulsing geometric patterns flowing like rivers beneath the surface of reality. "Our dimensions exist in parallel," she explained, "separated by what you might call a membrane. That membrane is thinning, fracturing in places. And that's bad because when dimensions bleed into each other, the laws of physics begin to collapse." Nori removed her hand, and the wall returned to normal. "Already anomalies are occurring. Haven't you noticed?" Julian had noticed. The strange weather patterns, electronic devices malfunctioning simultaneously across the city, the recent news, reports of time discrepancies, people experiencing minutes or hours differently in the same location. "I thought it was climate change or solar flares," he admitted. "It's dimensional bleeding," Nori corrected, "and it will get worse. Much worse." Julian's phone buzzed with a notification. His boss, Dominic, was calling an emergency meeting at Horizon Tech. "I have to go to work," Julian said, suddenly remembering the ordinary world still existed. "What am I supposed to do with you?" Nori smiled enigmatically. "I can alter my appearance to blend with your kind." Her form shimmered, and suddenly she looked almost human, still striking with her silver hair and unusual eyes, but no longer glowing or translucent. "That might work," Julian conceded. "But you can't come to my office." "I must remain close." "To you," Nori insisted. "Your quantum resonance signature is what anchors me to this dimension." Julian felt a headache forming. "Fine. You can come, but you'll have to pretend to be my consultant or something." On the train to Horizon Tech, Julian noticed how other passengers subtly shifted away from Nori, as if unconsciously sensing her otherness. She stared out the window with childlike wonder, occasionally pointing to things humans took for granted. Birds, traffic signals, a street performer juggling fire. "Your world is chaotic," she observed, "but beautiful in its disorder." "Speaking of chaos," Julian lowered his voice, "how exactly am I supposed to help with this dimensional crisis?" "Your program, Harmony, accidentally created a stabilizing algorithm that can repair dimensional tears," Nori explained. "We need to amplify it, adapt it to work at a quantum level." "That's impossible," Julian protested. "Harmony is just a home automation system." "Nothing is just anything," Nori replied cryptically. "The patterns you incorporated, they mimic the fundamental structure of the dimensional membrane." The train lurched to a stop, and an announcement indicated technical difficulties. Around them, passengers checked their watches and phones, frowning at inconsistent times. "Another anomaly," Nori whispered. At Horizon Tech, the emergency meeting revealed that systems worldwide were experiencing unprecedented glitches. Dominic looked haggard as he explained that their newest product launch would be delayed. "Something's interfering with all our systems," he told the team. "It's like the basic laws of computing have changed overnight." Julian felt Nori's gaze on him, intense and meaningful. During a break, she pulled him into an empty conference room. "Your colleagues are observing the symptoms without understanding the cause," she said urgently. "We need access to your mainframe." "That's restricted," Julian argued. "I can't just—" He was interrupted by the building's alarm system activating without cause. The lights flickered, and through the window Julian saw impossible colors bleeding. "Into the sky! The fractures are widening," Nori said, her human disguise momentarily slipping to reveal her true form. "We're running out of time, Julian." As the chaos around them grew, Julian made his decision. "Follow me," he said, leading her toward the secure server room. "But this better work, or we might just make things worse." Nori's eyes gleamed with something between hope and fear. "There is no certainty, Julian Mercer, only possibility." Hunters in the shadows. The server room hummed with energy as Julian's fingers flew across the keyboard. Nori hovered behind him, her disguise wavering slightly in the glow of multiple monitors. "Your security systems are primitive," she observed, watching as Julian bypassed the final firewall. "Primitive enough to keep most people out," Julian muttered. "But I helped design them, so I know the back doors." He pulled up the Harmony code, his pride and joy, the smart home system that had earned him a promotion last year. Looking at it, now through Nori's eyes, he could see patterns he'd never consciously noticed before. Mathematical sequences that shouldn't work together but somehow did. "There," Nori pointed, her finger leaving a trail of light on the screen. "That sequence. It's a perfect mirror of the dimensional membrane structure." Julian squinted at the code. "I don't even remember writing that part. It just came to me one night." "Because part of you exists in both dimensions," Nori explained. "Your consciousness bridges the gap even if you weren't aware of it." A security alert flashed on another monitor. Julian frowned. "Someone's trying to access the building's security system remotely." Nori's expression darkened. "They've found us." "Who's found us?" "The Sentinels," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "They hunt beings like me who cross dimensions. They believe separation must be maintained at all costs." Julian started to ask another question when the power cut out. Emergency lights bathed the room in an eerie red glow, and the distant sound of the security doors unlocking echoed through the building. "We need to leave, now." Nori grabbed Julian's arm, her touch sending electric tingles up his spine. "But the code. Download what you can. We'll continue elsewhere." Julian fumbled in the dim light, connecting a portable drive and initiating a transfer. The progress bar crawled across the screen agonizingly slowly. "Hurry!" Nori urged, her attention focused on the server room door. "They're coming!" The download completed just as heavy footsteps approached. Julian pocketed the drive and followed Nori to a maintenance door at the back of the room. They emerged into a service corridor just as three figures entered the server room behind them. Through the closing door, Julian caught a glimpse of them, human in form but moving with an unsettling mechanical precision, dressed in sleek gray uniforms with mirrored visors that reflected nothing. "Down here," Nori whispered, pulling Julian toward a stairwell. They descended in tense silence, Julian's heart pounding so loudly he was certain it would give them away. When they reached the basement level, Nori led him through a maze of utility corridors with uncanny confidence. "How do you know your way around?" Julian asked as they emerged through a service exit into an alley behind the building. "I accessed your building's schematics while you were sleeping," Nori replied matter-of-factly. "Your digital security is as permeable as your dimensional boundaries." The street beyond the alley looked normal, people going about their day, unaware of the otherworldly hunters or the dimensional crisis threatening their reality. But Julian noticed subtle wrongness everywhere. Pigeons flying in perfect geometric formations, a traffic light cycling through colors that didn't belong in the spectrum, a child pointing at the sky where faint, impossible shapes were forming in the clouds. No one else seems concerned, Julian observed. Humans rationalize what they cannot comprehend, Nori said. Their minds rewrite perception to maintain the illusion of normalcy. But the effects will become too severe to ignore soon. They ducked into a crowded cafe, finding a corner table where Julian could connect his laptop to the downloaded files. As he worked, Nori kept watch, her disguise firmly in place but her posture tense. "The Sentinels," Julian said quietly. "Are they from your dimension?" Nori shook her head. "They exist between dimensions, guardians of the boundaries. Usually they maintain balance, but something has changed. They've become zealous." Julian looked up from his screen. "So they want to stop us from fixing the membrane?" "They believe the fractures are a natural recalibration," Nori explained. "But they're wrong. This is unprecedented, a cascade failure that could collapse both our realities." A young man at a nearby table suddenly froze mid-motion, coffee cup halfway to his lips. Around him, other patrons continued their conversations, unaware. "Temporal pocket," Nori whispered. "Another symptom." Julian turned back to his code with renewed urgency. "I think I see how to modify the algorithm, but I'll need more processing power than my laptop can provide." Nori's gaze swept the cafe, then fixed on a point outside the window. "We don't have time to find another facility. They're here." Across the street, two sentinels stood perfectly still amid the moving pedestrians, their mirrored visors reflecting the increasingly disturbed sky. "Back exit," Julian suggested, already closing his laptop. They slipped through the kitchen, ignoring the protests of the staff, and out into another alley. Rain was falling, but wrong, each droplet suspended momentarily before continuing its descent, creating a staggered effect like a glitching video. "We need somewhere safe," Julian said, pulling his jacket over his head. "Somewhere with computing power." Nori's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. "There is one place they won't expect us to go." "Where?" "The fracture point, where the dimensional bleeding first began." She pointed east, toward the city's edge. "The place where my box first appeared in your world." Julian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the unnatural rain. "And why won't they look for us there?" "Because," Nori said grimly, "it's the most dangerous place for both of us to be. The laws of physics are almost completely unraveled there. Thunder cracked overhead, but instead of sound, it released a shower of crystalline fragments that dissolved before touching the ground. We don't have a choice, do we?" Julian realized. Nori's expression softened slightly. "There's always a choice, Julian, but not always a good one." Together they moved deeper into the city's shadowed places, hunted figures in a world slowly coming undone. The hidden truth? They traveled through a city becoming increasingly untethered from reality. Traffic lights displayed colors that had no names, shadows fell in directions that contradicted the position of the sun, and in one park, a fountain flowed, upward, water-defying gravity in elegant, impossible arcs. Julian and Nori navigated this shifting landscape with urgent purpose, staying to back streets and avoiding the areas where the dimensional bleeding was most severe. The portable drive, containing the Harmony algorithm, felt heavy in Julian's pocket, a small device carrying the potential salvation of two worlds. "How much farther?" Julian asked, his voice hushed as they passed a group of pedestrians walking in perfect synchronization, like dancers in a macabre ballet. "Not far," Nori replied. "We're approaching the event horizon." They turned down an unremarkable street lined with abandoned warehouses. At the end stood a building that seemed to waver in Julian's vision, as if viewed through heat waves. "The dimensional fracture point." "That's where your box appeared?" Julian asked. "Yes." Nori's voice had grown softer, more hesitant. Julian, before we go further, there's something you should know. They ducked into the shadow of a loading dock, temporarily hidden from both human eyes and the pursuing sentinels. In the relative privacy, Nori's disguise fell away completely, revealing her true luminescent form. The dimensional breach wasn't an accident, she confessed, her eyes not meeting his. It was created deliberately. Julian felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. By who? By my people, Nori said. By me. The revelation hung between them, heavy and accusatory. Julian took a step back. You said your dimension was collapsing, that you needed my help. That part is true, Nori insisted. But the initial breach, we created it as an escape route, a way to survive the collapse of our reality by transferring ourselves to yours. Without considering the consequences for our dimension, Julian concluded, anger rising in his voice. Our leaders didn't care about the consequences, Nori agreed, sorrow evident in her luminescent features. But I do. That's why I came to find you specifically. To use my code to stabilize the breach. To use your code to heal both dimensions, she corrected. What our scientists failed to understand is that our realities are connected. If one falls, eventually so will the other. Julian processed this information, his mind racing. And the Sentinels? Where do they fit in this story? They detected our plan and intervened, Nori explained. They believe the only solution is to seal the breach completely, cutting off all connection between our dimensions. Would that work? Nori shook her head. It would doom my people to extinction and only delay the collapse of your dimension. The damage is already spreading. Before Julian could respond, a low, mechanical hum filled the air. They pressed deeper into the shadows as two sentinels glided past, their movements precise and unnatural. We need to reach the fracture point, Nori whispered once the sentinels had passed. It's our only chance. Despite his reservations about Nori's revelations, Julian nodded. They crossed the final distance to the wavering warehouse in a desperate sprint. Inside, reality itself seemed to be coming apart. Sections of the warehouse existed in multiple states simultaneously, walls that were both solid and transparent, floors that were concrete and then suddenly not there at all. In the center of the cavernous space hovered a pulsing tear in the fabric of space-time, edges fraying like a wound that refused to heal. The breach, Julian whispered, awed despite his misgivings. Yes. Nori approached it reverently. The gateway between our worlds. Julian set up his laptop near the breach, connecting the portable drive. The proximity to the dimensional tear caused the screen to flicker and distort, but the Harmony algorithm loaded successfully. Will this really work? Julian asked, fingers poised above the keyboard. In theory, Nori admitted. Your code contains patterns that resonate with the fundamental structure of both dimensions. If properly amplified, it could reweave the membrane. Julian began typing, modifying the algorithm according to Nori's guidance. As they worked, the breach pulsed more intensely, responding to their efforts. Why me? Julian asked suddenly, looking up from the code. Out of everyone in my dimension, why was I the one who could create this algorithm? Nori hesitated, then met his gaze directly. Because you're not entirely of this dimension, Julian. The word struck him like a physical blow. What? Your consciousness exists partially in both realities, Nori explained gently. You were born during a minor dimensional convergence, a brief moment when our worlds touched. Part of your mind has always been attuned to my dimension, receiving impressions, patterns, dreams. Julian's hands fell away from the keyboard as memories flooded back. Strange dreams throughout his childhood, intuitive leaps in his work that he could never explain, the persistent feeling of not quite belonging. So I'm what? Half-dimensional traveler? More like a bridge, Nori corrected. A naturally occurring connection between worlds that the Sentinels never detected. A crash from the entrance interrupted them. 3 sentinels stood in the doorway, their mirrored visors reflecting the chaos of the fractured reality. "Step away. From the breach," one commanded, voice metallic and emotionless. Nori moved protectively in front of Julian. "We're trying to save both dimensions. Your approach will doom everyone." "Contamination cannot be permitted," the sentinel replied. "The boundaries must be restored." As the sentinels advanced, the dimensional breach behind Julian and Nori pulsed violently, expanding in response to the confrontation. The warehouse walls began to dissolve, reality becoming increasingly unstable. Julian turned back to his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Keep them busy," he told Nori. "I think I can make this work." Nori nodded, her form brightening as she drew on her dimensional energy. She raised her hands, and waves of iridescent force rippled outward, temporarily halting the sentinel's advance. Julian focused entirely on the code, understanding it now in ways he never had before. He wasn't just writing an algorithm, he was communicating with the fabric of reality itself, using mathematics as the language. "Julian," Nori called, her voice strained as she continued to hold the sentinels at bay. "Whatever you're going to do it now." The breach expanded further, engulfing half the warehouse in swirling dimensional energy. Through it, Julian caught glimpses of Nori's world, a crystalline landscape of impossible beauty, slowly crumbling at its edges. With newfound clarity and purpose, Julian executed the modified algorithm. The laptop screen exploded with light and the code seemed to lift off the display, becoming visible in the air around them, golden mathematical symbols flowing toward the breach like a stream of conscious thought. Julian turned to Nori, understanding dawning in his eyes. "This was always my purpose, wasn't it?" Nori's expression was both sad and hopeful. "It's your choice, Julian. It's always been your choice." The final choice. The warehouse had become a nexus of colliding realities. The modified harmony algorithm flowed like liquid gold through the air, weaving itself into the dimensional breach. The sentinels pushed against Nori's barrier, their mechanical movements becoming erratic as reality fluctuated around them. Julian stood at the center of the chaos, finally understanding the truth that had eluded him his entire life. The strange dreams, the mathematical intuitions, the feeling of otherness, all of it made sense now. "What exactly is my choice?" Julian asked, raising his voice above the crescendo of dimensional energies. Nori's luminescence pulsed with effort as she maintained the barrier. "The algorithm needs a catalyst, a consciousness that exists in both dimensions to guide it. You can direct the energy to fully repair the membrane, permanently separating our worlds." Or, Julian prompted, sensing the alternative. "Or you can create a controlled passage, a bridge that would allow selective travel between dimensions while maintaining the overall integrity of both realities." The implications were staggering. "And which option saves your people?" "The bridge," Nori admitted. "With a permanent separation, my dimension will eventually collapse completely." One of the sentinels broke through Nori's barrier, advancing with mechanical purpose. "The dimensions must remain distinct. Contamination cannot be permitted." Julian looked from the sentinel to Nori, then to the swirling breach that showed glimpses of her crystalline world. "Why are you so determined to keep the dimensions apart?" he demanded of the sentinel. "Balance must be maintained," it intoned. "Integration leads to chaos. Chaos leads to collapse." "But they're already connected," Julian argued, gesturing to himself. "I'm living proof of that. What if separation isn't the natural state? What if connection is?" The sentinel paused, its mirrored visor reflecting the golden algorithm spiraling through the air. For the first time, its mechanical certainty seemed to waver. Julian turned back to his laptop, where the harmony code continued to execute. The warehouse around them had almost completely dissolved, reality becoming a fluid state where both dimensions coexisted in a shimmering overlay. "What happens to me?" Julian asked quietly. "If I become the catalyst?" Nori's expression softened with compassion. "Your consciousness will exist primarily between dimensions, neither fully here nor there." "Like the Sentinels," Julian realized. "Yes," Nori confirmed, "but with your humanity intact." Another Sentinel broke through the barrier, and Nori stumbled, her energy clearly fading. "Julian, whatever you decide, it must be now." The algorithm had reached its culmination point, waiting only for Julian's direction to complete its purpose. He closed his eyes, feeling the pull of both dimensions, the familiar solidity of his own world and the crystalline beauty of Nori's. In that moment of perfect balance, Julian made his choice. He reached into the swirling code, his fingers passing through the golden symbols as if they were water. As he touched the algorithm, his consciousness expanded, filling the space between worlds. He could feel every fracture in the dimensional membrane, every point where reality had begun to unravel. With newfound perception, Julian understood what needed to be done. Not separation, not chaotic merging, but harmony. A controlled, symphonic relationship between dimensions. The algorithm responded to his will, spreading outward from the breach like a healing web. Where it touched, reality stabilized, not by forcing the dimensions apart, but by creating a structured framework where they could coexist without destroying each other. The Sentinels froze, caught in the wave of restructuring energy. Their mechanical certainty confronted a new paradigm they had not been programmed to comprehend. "What have you done?" the lead Sentinel asked, its metallic voice carrying an unfamiliar note of uncertainty. "I've created balance through connection, not separation," Julian explained, his voice echoing strangely as if coming from multiple places simultaneously. The dimensions were never meant to be entirely apart. The warehouse slowly reconstituted itself around them, but changed. Walls that shimmered with traces of crystalline structure, floors that seemed solid yet somehow deeper than they should be. Reality had stabilized, but it was a new reality, one that acknowledged the connection between dimensions. Nori approached Julian, her expression filled with wonder. "You've created a harmony I never thought possible." Julian looked down at his hands, which now shimmered faintly with the same luminescence as Nori's skin. "I feel different." "You exist in both dimensions now," she explained. "A true bridge." The Sentinels conferred among themselves, their mechanical movements becoming more fluid, more natural. Finally, the lead Sentinel approached. "This solution was unanticipated," it admitted. "But the dimensional integrity readings are stabilizing. We will monitor this new configuration." "You'll find it works better than strict separation," Julian said. "Both dimensions can now support each other rather than drain each other." After the Sentinels departed, Julian and Nori stood alone in the transformed warehouse. Outside, the world was returning to normal, or a new normal. Most humans would never notice the subtle changes, their minds automatically adjusting to maintain their sense of reality, but the dimensional bleeding had stopped. "What happens now?" Julian asked, still adjusting to his new state of existence. "Now," Nori said, a smile playing across her luminescent features, "we build bridges." In the days that followed, Julian learned to navigate his expanded consciousness. He could perceive both dimensions simultaneously, shifting his focus between them like adjusting the lens of a camera. His apartment became a nexus point, existing partially in both realities. Nori remained with him, his guide in understanding the new state of existence he had created. Together they identified others like Julian, humans with dimensional resonance who could help maintain the bridges between worlds. They formed a network, a new kind of sentinel dedicated to harmony rather than separation. The harmony algorithm continued to run, now integrated into the very fabric of both dimensions. Julian's accidental creation had become the foundation of a new cosmic architecture. One evening, as they stood on Julian's balcony watching the sunset, the sky now occasionally shimmering with crystalline reflections from Nori's dimension, she turned to him with a question. "Do you regret your choice?" Julian considered this, feeling the gentle pulse of both dimensions flowing through his consciousness. His ordered, predictable life was gone forever, replaced by something infinitely more complex and beautiful. "No," he said finally. "Some packages are worth opening even when they're breathing." Nori laughed, the sound like chimes in a dimensional breeze. "Even when they turn your whole reality upside down?" Julian smiled, reaching out to take her hand. "Their luminescence mingling where they touched, especially then."